All right. Hey, everybody. Drew McLellan here from Agency Management Institute. Super glad you could join us today. As you know, if you're familiar with AMI, our job is to help you run the business of your business better. And we focus on all of the back of the house things at AMI. So biz dev, finance, and a big one, of course, is HR and people. And so it made perfect sense to Danielle and I that thinking about, we spend a lot of our time helping agencies identify future leaders and then groom and grow those folks. And also, obviously, as you've invested in them, how do you keep them for the long haul? And so we reached out to Dell. So let me just quickly introduce you to Dell and Danielle and why they're the two presenting today. And then we can get going. So Dell Esparza, upper right on your screen, longtime agency owner of his agency is called Esparza, and it's out of Albuquerque, New Mexico. Dell's been a part of AMI for, gosh, almost 20 years, I bet. Part of one of our live peer groups, a good and close personal friend to Danielle and I both for many years. And Dell actually facilitates our key executive group. So that's a group of non-owners, but people in a leadership role that come together twice a year in October and in April for 2 days of sort of peer-to-peer learning. And Dell does a lot of teaching and coaching around that. And he has a big heart for grooming and growing young talent. And then my partner in all things, Danyel McLellan, president at AMI, also does a lot of work with agency leaders. So she does a lot of one-on-one coaching with up-and-coming leaders to help them step into their role, and often is the one who's coaching when we're doing succession work and we have an internal purchase where an employee is buying out a founder. She's working with the employee to sort of groom and grow them to go from being an employee to behaving like an owner. So they're the perfect two to walk us through some of this learning today. So I'm going to have everybody mute yourself. Hang on, I'll just mute you all now. And then Dell and Danielle, unmute yourself, if you will. So here's my role today is I'm going to be keeping an eye on the chat, and I will interrupt with some questions as it makes sense. We will also have time for questions at the end. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Dell and Danielle and let them kick off. So it's all yours, guys.
All right. Welcome, everyone. Dell and I are really excited. We are particularly passionate about young leaders and their impact on an agency. So when we first started talking about this webinar, we were thinking about how valuable that our crucial leaders are and how we can actually have those strategies to keep them engaged, passionate, and retain them. All of us who have gone through the Great Resignation know that it was a really rough time losing good talent, and the financial and cultural impacts of that turnover could be really impactful in a negative way. So we really want to focus on all the strategies that, such as personalized growth career plans, recognition methods, work-life balance, and competitive benefits. We're both passionate too about mentorship and a coaching culture. So we'll talk a little bit about that and give you some insights and strategies on how to develop your young leaders and have them be a powerhouse for your agency. They're just really, for owners, having an extension of your business strategy, your culture. They're the ambassadors of your culture. They really empower the productivity and level of innovation that your agency can have. So we'll get started.
Great. So yeah, we have a full agenda today. We have about 30 slides, a pretty robust deck, and a lot of information, a lot of best practices that we're going to discuss. Very excited to be presenting here with Danielle. She's dynamic, has built an agency, sold an agency, has mentored countless people, and somebody certainly I call a close friend. And of course, Drew. I have been a part of Agency Management Institute before it was Agency Management Institute. It was called Agency Management Roundtable. I started my agency in April 1st of 2000, so getting ready to go on 24 years. I joined AMI, or Agency Management Roundtable at the time, in 2006, and it was truly transformational for me on a lot of different fronts. I don't have an advertising background. I have actually a finance degree and an economics degree. And what I thought was originally going to be a weakness entering into this industry has really proven to be a strength with the amount of math and analytics and ROI that goes into our day-to-day operations. It's really proven to be a very valuable background for me, for Esparza, and certainly for our clients. So very excited to be presenting to you today. As Drew indicated as well, I also facilitate the key executive group. There's a dynamic, there's 3 groups. Each group has about 13, 14 members in it. We have really rich conversations about best practices, what's working, what some of their frustrations are, what they want out of their owners, what they want out of their peers, and how they want to grow. And so a lot of what we'll be talking about today is not just from my experience and from what I think is, owners and agencies should be doing, or what Danyel feels, but from what we're actually hearing from your leaders and from leaders in our industry, and what they want, and what they need. And so with that, we like for this to be as interactive as possible. I think there's a chat function, if I'm not mistaken, and if you want to ask a question, we might make this very interactive and ask you all questions as well when we get to a topic that we think might make the most sense. So with
I'm watching the chat though.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks, Drew. So the very first section is the value of young leaders, and as a rule, I decided about 8 years ago that anyone I'm around, anyone I'm associated with, cannot speak negatively about millennials or Gen Zs, because it started becoming very much commonplace. And in reality, most agency owners are a little older. Most of them are either baby boomers or Gen X's. Most of the people that work for you are Gen Zs or millennials. And they were raised differently. They think differently. Just because of that, though, doesn't mean that they don't add a value. They add a very, very great perspective. Most of that demographic also, when it comes to our industry, which is ever evolving and is different now than it was yesterday, and is different, is going to be different tomorrow than it is today. We need this kind of generation. We need these kind of deep thinkers, these perspectives. Most of your young leaders that fall in that demographic of Zs or millennials are early adopters of technology. They're going to be the ones that are going to be pushing innovative ideas. They're the ones that are going to be the most courageous ones in your office. And in an industry as evolving and as ever-changing as ours, we need that profile. They bring tremendous insight. And so making sure that we're giving them the rope to be able to feel like their voice is heard, to feel appreciated, and to feel like they can attempt some things and potentially make some mistakes and not feel there's a repercussion as a result, but celebrate those risks, is the kind of culture that they'll thrive in and ultimately will lift the entire agency. So certainly the value that they bring is significant and should never be understated in any agency.
Yep, I completely agree with you on that, Del. I know we talked about this where, they haven't been broken by what they think has to be done or the way it should be. And opening ourselves up to that insight and creativity and innovation it actually adds so much power to your agency. And I think that we have to, as owners, always be leading the way. Like, we have to lead our leaders. And there is a truth to that, but there's also I love the philosophy of leading from behind, where you give them some openness with some parameters and guardrails that help them feel really engaged and invested. And they feel that, hey, this owner trusts me to make some decisions, and they trust me to bring some insights. And it really ignites some passion about the industry and what is possible. And so giving them a safe place to show that passion and ignite that passion with the appropriate guardrails can really impact your agency as a whole, and also the people who are under your young leaders, because it's inspiring to watch them be so engaged in your agency. So again, just because that we've done things a certain way when we came up in the industry does not mean that it is the only way to do it. So giving them the ability to mold and shape your culture and your agency can come with really unexpected positive results. You just have to be brave enough to let them have a little lead.
Yeah, and the buzzword of diversity, equity, and inclusion is not just in gender, is not just in race, it's not just in sexual orientation, it's also in age and in thought. And so, as agency owners, we certainly want to celebrate that as much as possible. And so that, young leaders and celebrating the contributions that they bring and giving them as much room as possible to take on those risks and to Danielle's point, that trust word is the essence of any successful relationship, whether it's husband-wife or employer-employee. So giving them, I think, is absolutely critical. In the absence of that is the cost of turnover. And certainly the cost of losing a top tier leader in your agency is significant. Let alone the cost of losing any employee. And so those costs can include anything from recruitment costs. You're having to hire a recruiter to replace them. There's onboarding and training costs. You're taking resources away from somebody else who has to bring somebody else on board and train them accordingly. There's productivity loss accordingly, let alone if they're client facing. The risk with the client and the client relationship and possibly impeding the integrity or that relationship, how that client views you in their eyes. Obviously, employee morale as a result of turnover is a significant cost, and also the institutional knowledge and the expertise loss that you lose. All of these are significant. Economists have came out with the average cost of replacing a key employee can range anywhere from 75% to 200% of their annual salary. So, you take, for instance, just to do the math easy, $100,000 employee, to replace that just based on those variables that I spoke about earlier and referenced earlier is going to be anywhere from $75,000 to $200,000. To replace the average $60,000 employee is going to be $45,000 to $120,000. So I mean, these are real costs. So some of the tools and techniques and some of the ideas that we're going to be talking about later on in this deck are going to be absolutely critical that you consider, you employ, and you talk to your team about deploying in your respective agency.
Exactly. And actually putting this in your operating budget and understanding that the investment that you're making for the time and career advancement and professional development, it is a small price to pay when you think of the numbers that Del just said. That no, that's an investment. It's an investment in your agency and the growth that the potential growth that you have. And one of the key parts of this is creating a positive work environment, a good culture. And agencies, we used to always think, if you have a ping pong table and a kegerator, that means that you have a great agency culture. And that is not what culture is about. And I think when we actually put more focus and depth into how we think of growing our culture, it's the seeds that we plant. It is the processes we put around a safe space for innovation and growth and development. And when employees feel that their values are supported and that they work in a positive work culture, it increases their job satisfaction, it increases their engagement, the loyalty to the company, and to Jell's point, reduces the turnover. So there's plenty of evidence of the importance of a work culture, but it really comes down to your mission, vision, values, and how you thread that and weave that throughout everything that you do. And so giving leaders the opportunity to help mold the culture is great. So, some of the basic things such as having a culture club where you let people, the young leaders, come in and decide how that they want to live those values and show those values, and thinking about that and how they approach the clients and approach the work and also each other as a team and a collaboration. So you as an owner can help guide those conversations on what's important, what your values are, and allowing them to take those values and bring them to life in a lot of different ways. So I think another thing that is important in your culture is to put more processes and opportunities that are cross-departmental problem solving. It gives, again, an engagement level with your employees that's very different than just coming in and clocking in and leaving. They feel like they have an invested interest in their work environment. And so allowing some of the decisions, you know, again, giving the right guardrails around a culture club that says, hey, this is your budget, this is as many hours as you can spend, and we want to do something within the community. We want to do something that is engaging with our clients. Give them problems to solve that are around culture will help them feel an ownership with your agency in a different way than somebody who's just clocking in and leaving at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, good points, Danielle. I don't know if any of you all ever followed the cartoon Dilbert, but there was one one that really stood out to me, and it was Dilbert's boss had a sign on his door and on his office door, and it said, "I have an open door policy. If you see my door open, make sure you come up and close it." So I mean, nobody wants that by any means, and so yeah, I think at the genesis of anything when it comes to creating a positive work environment is encouraging open communication, whether it's something as simple as a suggestion box that is reviewed by you and your leadership team, and circled back around with all employees about what you're going to do about that suggestion, or it's appreciation programs where peers can recognize and appreciate other peers, or whether it's making sure that you have solid work-life balances, which is what we're going to be talking about here shortly. But one of the things that constantly comes up with survey after survey after survey, and it's not just industry specific, it's not just specific to advertising, although there is a tremendous thirst and desire by young leaders, is its professional development opportunities. And so that fosters really a positive working culture.
Right. And your leaders should really be the ambassadors of your agency culture. So especially when you get to be a little larger, it isn't just coming from the owners. It's your leadership team and your leaders that actually bring that culture to life and are the ambassadors. And so allowing them to really have an investment in the team and how they model your culture through the work is imperative. So, and we talk about engagement. Employee engagement is one of the highest indicators of feeling of actually retaining your key people. And engaging them isn't about just putting on things for them to interact with, but allowing them to create them as well. A lot of things, as we talked about the employee recognition, there's websites like Thanks that will allow them to come in and give gifts to each other and give kudos. Even Slack channels that allow people to engage with each other are super important and help build morale. So not only does the encouragement come from you as an owner, but allowing peer-to-peer encouragement is super important as well. Ongoing learning, as we've talked about, is really important, which we'll talk a little bit more in depth. Social causes that are important to your agency. There's an agency owner, they created a sustainability club that they were very passionate about sustainability as an agency. It was one of their key values. So they created a cross-departmental team that was voluntary. If people would come in and they started a compost program and how to do a new recycling program. And it really made the teams feel as if the owners cared about what the agency cared about, and that they had some autonomy in bringing that into the agency world and created a lot of camaraderie as well. Also, any of the knowledge sharing that you do, having that growth mindset within your agency and allowing leaders to find out what they learn and bring it back. So that could be from a lunch and learn perspective. It can be from how are we going to take this learning that we found and searched for and shared with our departments, and how do we use that in our work? Really creating processes that are aligned with how employees want to feel invested and giving them a voice in it creates not only the loyalty to the agency, but a camaraderie and team with each other. And we know that the power of peers and peer relationships can make a really big difference in the culture. So creating processes around that are important. Wellness activities, I think that after COVID, a lot of agencies have implemented different sorts of wellness activities, from having yoga in the morning to one agency brought in massage chair once a month to just have that wellness of the focus on wellness, and a walking club during lunch gives people some places around the work to really engage with each other, and it's approved by the agency, so it feels that, again, it's much more part of the culture.
Yeah. Yeah, good points, Danielle. And as we all know, a motivated and engaged team is the cornerstone of any thriving workforce, for sure. So continuous learning and development, something certainly I'm very involved with. So what I hear often from key executive members is how important this is. What I hear from my employees on a one-to-one basis when I'm conducting my one-to-one meetings with them is how important this is to them. I don't care whether it's a Gen Z, I don't care whether it's a millennial, I don't care whether it's a Gen X. Everybody wants continuous learning and development, and there's various ways to do that, including what you can deploy in your own respective agency, whether it's a lunch and learn that you have on a monthly basis. At my agency at Esparza, we have media partners that come in on a monthly basis. We provide lunch. Sometimes they bring in lunch and they present to us about new tools that they're using, new forms of media that they're using, trends that they're seeing in their respective media, whether it's television, whether it's traditional, whether it's digital. I mean, they want to get in front of you, and it's a way for your team to learn more holistically about the industry. So, the importance of ongoing education and skill development cannot be understated by any means. Make sure that you have an effective training program within your organization. And it's not just one thing to say that we have a training program or we have an ongoing university or lunch and learns, but actually put it in writing and announce it to the agency. Hey, this is what we're doing, and this is what we want you to hold us accountable for doing, is on a monthly basis, at least on a quarterly basis, have a speakers bureau, and where somebody comes in and speaks to you, and or you have a team of within your employee base that get up and speak about a topic that they're seeing, about a trend that they're seeing, and have them teach the rest of their peers what they're learning. Obviously, there's other seminars outside of your agency that you can tap into. AMI has a very robust workshop program. They have the Key Executive Group program. There is not one employee that I have that hasn't been to at least one of the workshops, and it's something that they're getting. We certainly are. AMI is ingrained in the operations of my agency at Esparza, but sometimes when an employee hears it from somebody else, it becomes a little bit more sticky, and it becomes a little bit more real about the importance of a particular process or policy.
Right. And, I think it's so going back to being around peers. Dell's pretty humble, but the Key Exec Group is really a powerful vehicle for peers to get together and say, oh, what's going on in your agency, and feeling inspired and coming back with a renewed energy into your agency. So giving them, again, a platform to talk through with you as the owner of what they learned, what they wanted to accomplish, what they're going to bring back to improve your agency is really, really powerful. And I think that we forget as owners how important our time is with our teams. And so anything around their development and growth that is a one-to-one conversation, or they feel like they have a platform to talk about their ideas with you, or is just really powerful. And I think that another thing about the continuous learning, one of the questions that I think agency owners should ask when they bring in that growth mindset of continuous learning, is if they go away to go to a workshop, to go and they take an online class, whatever it is, going with the question, how can you save the agency $5,000 or make the agency $5,000? And setting that expectation that they're going to answer that question when they come back from that. And it can be from a technical expertise, if they're learning HubSpot or whatever the thing is. Well, how can that be integrated in what we do for the work for our clients? How can that be translated in how we teach and train our people at the agency in general? So really important, and has such an impact on retention, engagement, and productivity.
The other advantage of that is your employees don't really understand what you're investing in them. And you want to remind them that, boy, by the time I pay for the class or the workshop or the plane ticket or give you time off from work and you're not doing billable work, we're really investing in you because we believe in you. We want you to keep growing. We want you to have a great career here. And all we ask in return is that you bring that learning back and help us improve the agency. And so that's a great way, again, to show partnership and your commitment to them. So there's great languaging around why you're asking them to come back with that specific of an ask.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And the beauty, and Danielle, you touched on this with peer-to-peer learning. The beauty of that is, regardless of how good of a relationship you have with a key employee or any one of your employees, there's going to be times where they just don't feel comfortable going to an owner or even going to a manager. And to have a forum or an opportunity to speak to a peer, to problem solve with a peer, to brainstorm with a peer is absolutely invaluable. What we do is not brain surgery, and it's not rocket science. In many cases, the challenges that we're facing are the same challenges that other agencies are facing. But be able to get together and have some peer-on-peer conversations before they come to an owner or their respective manager with some solutions only makes your agency stronger.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, and it's really fun when they come back and they say, oh wow, we do it better than our agency does it better than the other agencies, or we really do know what we're talking about of X, Y, and Z. There's this point of pride that's really fun to watch when your leaders come back and say, oh well, I know now what's going on in other agencies and we're pretty good at this X, Y, and Z. So a lot of fun with that is that pride can come out in a lot of great ways, and again makes them feel more connected to your agency.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right.
So going into Del touched on this earlier, that we have sort of a bias sometimes as agency owners who've been in the industry for so long that, when I was in the agency business, it just took grit. Like if you wanted to be the director, then you just got out there and you made it happen. And now all the kids want these career paths, et cetera, et cetera. And that's just a very slippery slope. So I encourage you as owners to think of this as an opportunity. Like you have the ability to help mold and guide each of your employees. And I think the magic of the intersection between what the talents and skills of your leader or your employee and the goals and strategic direction of the agency. So that intersection, some people say, oh, growth plans and career paths should be just tailored to, what their job description is, et cetera, or what they're passionate about. But I think that intersection is important. So if you're deciding to bring on a new department, like let's say you're thinking of having a strategy department, or the style of again, Del said, things change all the time. So your agency needs to continue to evolve and change. You giving them a direction that intersects with what the goals are of the agency can be really powerful, because not only are you reaching your own strategic goals for the business, but you're aligning them with the talent and skills and engagement of your team. So this shouldn't be just I have to do this, but hey, this is an ability for us to have some really interesting growth opportunities and guiding that and guiding your team. The 87% of millennials say that career paths are important to them, and career paths and aligning with the owner of the company is part of that. a couple of things that I would suggest is that encourage your young leaders to switch their mindset from climbing the corporate ladder, kind of that linear path, and think of it as climbing a jungle gym with multiple routes to the top. I think with smaller agencies specifically, we have org charts and we tend to be so invested in the org chart. Again, it's important. However, if you have somebody who's a director of client services and you have some great account supervisors that still want to raise up, don't feel that there's other opportunities to show advancement that aren't quite as linear, that still give people an invested interest in the agency and being able to develop. You'll have what we say rock stars and superstars. So your rock stars can be very, very good at their job and they're just, solid, always advancing in their craft or their specific specialization. But they don't necessarily want to manage people, or they don't necessarily, have a desire to keep raising up the ladder, so to speak. But they're just as important as your superstars. And your superstars are the people that are always hungry for the next step, the next part of growth, how do we keep moving forward? So creating parameters about what that looks like these are the things that you need to do to be able to level up, and also giving them different leadership opportunities. One thing I love that I think is really effective are cross-departmental task forces. So taking an agency problem that's happening and put some of these people who want to keep growing in these roles and saying, hey, this is the problem we need you to fix. So we need you to look at that. And that's part of your growth plan and part of your career growth. There was one agency that took one of their art directors who there was no ability to be the creative director. The creative director was one of the owners. And they helped them advance into a different role from art director to a production art director, which was much more about the process around design. And so it was a different way to give a path that wasn't as classical, but it still felt like an advancement to that superstar.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point. Advancement is not just vertical, it's horizontal as well. And we talked about this at the onset of this presentation, is our industry is ever changing, and it's constantly changing. And so how you grow can be horizontal in a different position, in a different department. It can, or certainly if it's large enough, it can be vertical, but making sure that you're having those career path in growth plan conversations, at least on a quarterly basis with your employees. Some people wait until their annual anniversary to have these kind of conversations. By then, you've lost 12 months. I mean, you could really start paving a path, sending them to appropriate coursework or workshops or seminars to help them in that growth plan. And I also think that this is something that where AMI has a really valuable tool, and I use it for myself, and I use it for my and I encourage my employees to use it. And that's a career path is not just based on your career; it's also based on your life as well. Mm-hmm. And Drew has a one-page document called your life plan, and it's no more than one page, but it's almost like a business plan for your life. It includes some career aspirations and where you want to go, but also includes how you what legacy do you want to leave behind? How do you want to be known as an individual, and what do you need to do in order to get there? And I think all of that coupled together is an approach that is an owner or as a leadership person in an agency. All of these tools are not separate. They're all inclusive. And so the life plan is something I also share. I share my life plan with all of my employees. It's certainly a sign of vulnerability, but it's also accountability as well. And so if you don't have access to Drew's life plan, I certainly would strongly encourage you to look at that and having that a part of an individual's career growth plan.
Right. When we did the agency edge research a couple of years ago, we talked to agency employees, and one of the key criteria for them staying at an agency was feeling like the owner understood them as a whole person, didn't just see them as a job or a task or a role. inside the agency. But so the life plan is a great way to do that. When we send out the replay link with the video and the deck, we will also include the life plan for you to download, and you can choose to either do it yourself or share with your team or both.
That's right. And we'll also include, we have a template for the growth career plans and education plans that we'll put in that download as well.
So recognition and feedback. Who doesn't like recognition, and who absolutely loves feedback? Your team likes both and wants both. They want good recognition when they do things right, and they also want constructive feedback when there's areas that they can grow or there's areas that they can improve. I will say that's something that's constantly asked by members of the key executive group of their owners. They want to know how they could further contribute to the agency's success and how it could affect them either monetarily or through benefits or through ownership. But having a solid recognition program where it's recognition is done both as a whole and agency-wide, sometimes through social channels, and also sometimes in private. Sometimes people don't like for all the attention to be paid on them, but making sure that when somebody goes above and beyond, when their acts are aligned with your values, that it's acknowledged and it's appreciated. You want to implement regular feedback sessions. So if you, and AMI has a wonderful one-to-one document that you all can use as a guide. That regular that allows for that feedback session. What went right over the course of the last month? What could have been improved? Do they have the resources to be successful, and what do they need in order to be more successful? So really using those one-to-one and that focused time when you have, and that focused and captive time when you have their attention for that recognition and feedback. Always remembering to the 80-20% rule: 80% positive feedback, 20% constructive feedback. They'll remember the 20% far more than they'll remember the 80%. But both are very, very critical to any employee's growth.
Yeah, and I think another thing is, do you want to teach your leaders to be able to give recognition and feedback to their teams as well? So not only is it really important for you as an owner to be able to give that recognition and feedback in a very constructive way, but it's really important that you teach your team how to give feedback. That's one of the struggles our young leaders have oftentimes, especially when there's conflict or they have something going on that they need to give their team members some harder, that 20% of that kind of feedback. They're not comfortable with that. I mean, honestly, as agency owners, we hardly are comfortable with that. So being really clear on the expectations of your agency on how to do that and how to do that in a productive way is important. And going to that agency culture of kind of the transparency and vulnerability and being able to have that growth mindset as an agency, you want to normalize having those harder conversations and that harder feedback to help continue your team to grow and not feel defensive when they receive it. So it's important for you as an owner to help set the stage for that in an effective way.
And if you're doing it, if you're providing feedback, both constructive and positive feedback on a consistent basis, then it's not so jarring. It's not so hard when you actually have to have a hard conversation with one of your employees. Fostering a feedback-rich culture is absolutely instrumental to long-term success of any organization.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Ooh, this is a trigger word for some agency owners. I know that we all have that work-life balance. It goes back, we read all the articles. Everyone knows how important this is for our employees, but we do have that as a trigger word where we think of, well, again, in the old days, we lived at work. And I think we all have a bias that often many of us have a bias that you have to be butts in seats for 10 hours a day, and that makes you a good employee. But I challenge you to look at that assumption and instead of looking at, oh, how are they sitting in their seats? Are they doing all their things? And look at that as a benchmark for success, that you put other KPIs and ownership around productivity that gives you really good data instead of just what you're assuming. You know, somebody could sit at their desk 10 hours a day, but they might not be doing all the work. And so if you have employees that could do the same job in half of the time, you shouldn't feel that that is a negative thing. It should be, hey, you're being productive. You're doing more with less. And we know from retention and employee engagement that the flexibility that you can put safe parameters and parameters around are one of the key factors for people to feel that their company trusts them, that they want to be invested and engaged, and it actually emphasizes productivity. It improves productivity instead of and if the right parameters are in place and the right KPIs for success are shared. So employee well-being has become a very big thing. We talked about that, and it really gives them the flexibility and accountability. So creating a culture of accountability and ownership helps make work-life balance less of a trigger word, because people are really clear what they have to accomplish and do to be a good employee, and that there is measurable ways to assess that productivity. And so setting that clear expectation and really having that being driven by KPIs allows the flexibility for the team to be a little bit flexible. And some agencies do different things. I know, again, get that those yabba dabba doers that Drew always talks about, where they want to leave at 5 o'clock every day. Maybe they are going to come in and start working at 7 and really are putting in some extra time and that we might not see. So I think, again, the measurable goals and expectations are important. And it's really the flexibility that matters. So putting the things in place like flexible PTO, or some agencies will say you have a choice of working from, 8 to 4 or 9 to 5. And it depends if you're a morning person or a later person. And it just gives them the same work expectations, but allows them to be flexible for their life. Because as Del was talking about, and Drew had mentioned too, it's that personal understanding that each employee has different needs, and creating a structure that allows for them to be a little more flexible feels like this freedom that other people don't have in other companies. And so that retention strategy is super important. And I know that for everybody who has been competing for talent and understands that when we, again, went through the Great Recession and it was a lot harder to hire, we had to up our game in what we offered to our employees as far as retention and attracting talent. And really, for an agency owner to feel comfortable and giving flexibility does not mean losing control of the agency. Again, those KPIs really help ground that flexibility in a way that will keep everything running the way that it should, and people productive.
Yeah, and I think
Go ahead, Del.
I think if COVID taught us anything, it was that we can be productive and still be flexible, and ensuring to Danielle's point that those KPIs exist so that you're still measuring productivity. You measure productivity, but you're giving them the flexibility. One of our core values and our pillars is empathetic. We have no idea what struggles our employees are going through, whether it's a special needs child that they're dealing with at home, whether they're going through a divorce, whether they're going through an aging parent, situation. We have no idea what they're going through. It's our role to make sure that they find that balance. I don't like to use the word work-life or use the term work-life balance. I actually like to say that it is our responsibility as agency owners or as leaders in our industry to foster work-life integration. Because if you have a high performer individual, they want to excel professionally, but they also want to excel personally. They want to be a good wife, a good husband, a good father, a good mother, a good friend, but they also want to grow professionally. So it is our role to make sure that we figure out how they can be successful at both and foster that work-life integration. So I'm sorry.
I agree with you, Del. I think it's a work-life balance versus, I think it's a work-life blend rather than balance. I don't think it's half and half, right? So somebody asked, how are agencies measuring productivity? And by the way, you guys, you have about 10 minutes left. Productivity is often about the billability and utilization. It is on time delivery of work. It's, are they delivering work on budget? And for each of your employees in each role, you're going to have different productivity measurements. And we could probably do a whole webinar on just that. But it really is around having clear, measurable expectations for each role, and then giving them feedback on how they're doing against those measurements. A lot of times we don't articulate in a very tangible way what our expectations are, and then we get frustrated when they don't meet them. Okay, noted, Chris. We will plan a webinar on employee productivity. So, and then somebody else asked, how do you be flexible and fair? I think that's the key, right? Is there are certain boundaries. Like, look, as Danielle was talking about, if you're saying, look, you can come in early and leave a little earlier, or come in later and leave a little later, you could also say, look, everybody has to be here between 10 and 3. So if you want to come in at 7 or 8 or 9 and start your day, but your team needs you between 8 and 3 or whatever that is. And so I think there is a way to be fair and flexible. And again, that may be a great webinar topic. All right, you guys keep going, because I know you have more slides and we don't have a lot of time. Agreed, Deborah, on that.
So competitive benefits and perks, this is always an important one when it comes to discussions at the key executive group sessions. But the beauty of most agencies in AMI is the size. The size of the agency, that we're small to medium-sized businesses. It allows for a tremendous amount of flexibility when it comes to compensation, when it comes to benefits. We can offer so many different things, and I will tell you that most of your employees, 78% of your employees say that the benefits package is just as important as the salaries. And trust me, they all know what each other makes. They all share their salaries. So the one thing that you can be, the one point of differentiation, and one way you can really kind of recognize one of your key employees for going above and beyond, is through a great benefit. And I've seen, and we can certainly talk about some things that we've seen as far as best practices. Some of the best practices that I've seen are beyond having a robust health and PTO and a retirement plan, is a defined benefit pension plan for key employees, where you're actually putting money into a life insurance product that will help them towards their retirement. Something that really is almost a golden handcuff if they're there for any length of time, but is also a tremendous benefit that they're not going to be able to get with very few other employers. Obviously, unlimited PTO has been around for a while. Floating holidays speaks to Danielle's desire for your employees have for flexibility. There's vacation time off, BTO, that a lot of agencies are doing. Some agencies are starting to do a sabbatical, where after 5 or 7 years of being there, they're able to take 3 months off, paid. And so some agencies are doing that. I think it would be hard depending on the size. But you talk about a retention strategy. It certainly is one, and it's actually the sabbatical language that I've seen also has some language in there about you have to stay around for a certain period of time after the sabbatical. Obviously,
we're seeing student loan reimbursement. Yeah. Most of the sabbaticals we're seeing are shorter than the 3 months, but we are seeing people do them. So you're right, Del. There's lots of options.
Yeah. So for personal travel allowances as well, where people are given a certain amount. So I mean, there's lots of options. There's ways you can be really, really creative with compensation package that your employees are wanting. Mm-hmm. So. And then the mentorship, which is something that I think is absolutely paramount to growing your team, and certainly something that Danyel does with her coaching. It's something that we help facilitate with the key executive group. There is such a thirst with your key employees, all your employees, to have a mentor, have somebody they can go to that's beyond the owner, beyond their boss, but somebody they can have honest conversations with. It's a way for them to grow, not just professionally, but also personally, when they're dealing with that work-life integration and how to make it work. having somebody that they're able to go to who's been there before benefits not just the mentor, but also the mentee. In many cases, the mentor benefits from the being able to share some of the bruises and some of the scars that they've experienced, and help somebody that they care about avoid that. Obviously, the mentee to be able to learn from experience and somebody who's been around for a while. There's so much benefit to having a structured mentorship program within your organization that's actually in written format and strongly encouraged by all leadership.
Absolutely.
And this is just a quote that I thought was great. A dedicated balance of mentoring someone is not creating them in your own image, but giving them the opportunity to truly create themselves. I just love this quote. And I thought it certainly made sense here. And I know we have just a few minutes left.
I think we should just maybe open it for questions. So we're happy to talk more about case study and postmortems. They're just an opportunity for your leaders to really show some investment in improving the agency and with the work that you do, and it helps. And then giving them the opportunity to teach that to the rest of the team on how to improve processes and the client work and the end product. So just another opportunity for your leaders to problem solve and also continually improve the agency and always looking to have that growth mindset of how can we improve things, how can we be better, and letting them lead that in a very well-structured way or with a very distinct process is really important for the leader's growth and also the agency's improvement. So.
Okay, so before we get to Q&A, just in case we'll stick around for a while, so don't worry, we'll stick around past the top of the hour if you have questions. But if you have questions about the Key Exec group or the AMI coaching or any of the other things you heard about, feel free to reach out to us. We're happy to tell you more about those things. So in the meantime, in the chat, or go ahead and unmute if you want, go ahead and fire away with questions, and we will, between the three of us, do our best to answer. Stunned silence. And by the way, some of this stuff you guys know, and it's different. It's one of the things that one of our philosophies at AMI is it's not our job to teach you only things you don't know. It's also our job to teach you things that you know better, but you still aren't doing. So some of these things you know you should be doing and maybe aren't doing as well as you should. And so this is our gentle nudge to sort of refocus on that. Can you go back one slide quickly? Somebody just said, so Del, you're driving. So I think this is about how do you get your team to help you do postmortems and learn from the good and the bad.
One of the hardest things for an agency is managing time, and a lot of times when a campaign is done, when it's after it's been completed, it's off to the next one. I mean, I mean, it's not as though we have we're just sitting around twiddling our thumbs, and so case studies in many cases are not done. What I've heard time and time again from your key executive group is how important it is to do this, to have a robust and rich conversation about what went right with the campaign, what went wrong, and have it as an open discussion with the entire agency. So the people that maybe weren't involved in that campaign can learn. People who were involved in the campaign are talking about and celebrating what went right, and also talking about what they're going to be, what they'll do differently next time. So it's really a forum for collective understanding, collective celebration, and collective learning. When we talked about putting this slide in, it seemed awkward especially considering the topic of nurturing young leaders. But the more we talked about it, we wanted to end with this because it's something that in many cases is not done because we just don't have the time. And or if we're doing it, it's for a pitch or it's for your website. It's not for collective learning. And really that's where the value of a postmortem and a case study can really pay dividends.
Right. Absolutely. And again, picking out something that has like the best of for the month and the work, and this is a failure or an opportunity to learn for the month, and making sure you have a very tight agenda and time limit, and what you're trying to accomplish in that meeting will optimize that time that you spend, that your team spends together.
Yeah. So a question here on creating a positive work culture. What are people who are fully remote doing? I'll add something and then I'll let Del and Danielle jump in. But one thing we're seeing is you really cannot substitute anything for face-to-face time. So agencies that have abandoned an office or no longer have the rental expense or whatever are redirecting those expenses to a once or twice a year couple day retreat where you're bringing the team together and they're actually able to create relationship. So there are lots of other things to do, but I will tell you there is just no substitute for actually having been in the same room with your coworkers. So
if you
Daniel,
don't have an
throw that to
office,
you.
yeah, if you don't have an office, again, to have those meetings that are all in, a lot of agencies, I think the most successful model is for your quarterly state of the agency meetings when you go over all the finances and going over what you've accomplished and what you're going to accomplish the next quarter, that once a quarter, getting everybody together in one place, and it could be in a work share space if you don't have an office space anymore. But I think that having that where it's a big meeting that people can work together for the day, and then oftentimes agencies will put a team building activity or a give back to the community activity aligned with that. So it's more of a 2-day experience, and allowing them just to be in the same space and work together. If the retreat can be a heavy lift. So I think the quarterly bringing everybody together when possible is one of the best ways to keep everybody engaged, have the new people, the people that have started in your agency, in a remote agency. It's very hard to integrate the new person oftentimes. And so also creating very robust onboarding for new employees or anybody who's just starting out is super important, and building a lot of community around that, and not just how to do the work, but how each person can contribute to making that person feel welcome, be it having a steward buddy basically that is for a new person that they can reach out to and ask all the questions to, has been something that's been really effective for agencies that are remote. And I would say too, making sure your communication channels are really clear on how you use each communication channel for what, helps set the standard for really good collaboration and communication. So,
and if you have a really remote team where a lot of people are scattered, you may not be able to, it may not make sense financially to fly everybody in once a quarter, but at least once or twice a year, bringing them physically together. Heather was saying in the comment section, they have a pretty dispersed team, so they don't always physically get together, but they will do the same thing in different cities. Like they'll pick we're all going to volunteer at a food bank, and everybody does it at their local level.
That's a great idea.
When they're in the same city, they do it together, but it may be 3 or 4 cities doing it, right? So weekly catch-up calls we're seeing and other things. So again, and by the way, these are great conversations to jump into the Facebook group and ask that question. We've got 2,000 agency owners and leaders in there who are really very generous about sharing their ideas too. So don't hesitate to pop in and ask those kind of questions.
And also put that up to your leaders too, or your team, and say, this is what we want to make sure we have connection and culture around our remote team. Let's problem solve this together and start to experiment with different ways that we can be a closer and collaborative team, because they'll feel more engaged, and when you're trying to implement those things, they'll feel an ownership to make those come to life in your agency.
Yeah. And by the way, if you're going to bring everybody in, you're going to fly everybody in. Somebody made a comment here that it's sort of mandatory. It absolutely has to be mandatory. So you have to have it on the calendar far in advance. You have to help them sort of get it planned, but it shouldn't be something that people can tap out of, because it's easy to argue that, oh, I've got little kids or I've got this or whatever. But if they know 3 months in advance or 6 months in advance, they can make those arrangements. And again, while you want to be flexible and you want to give them life work blend, it is okay for you to have expectations for them to get on a plane or get in a car and come hang out for a day or two. So
when you're doing your recruitment and in an interview process, those are really good things to determine and talk about during that time, so they understand that this is the expectation, whatever your agency chooses on how you get together. It's important in the interview process.
What other questions do you have for Del and Danielle? I'm watching the chat here. I know some of you have to go. So if you have to go, it was great having you. Thank you. We'll get this replay out in a week or so. So watch for it in the newsletter and in the Facebook group. A virtual happy hour. Yep, lots of agencies started that during COVID, and that stuck around as well. So that's been, I think, a popular one. And I think a lot of times too, for the like a virtual happy hour, you don't really talk about a lot of work things. You talk about, life things. And again, that's that whole person aspect of getting to know each other. Yeah, Heather, you're going to love the Key Exec meeting. So we're glad to have you joining us. Other questions for Danielle and Drew? No, I'm Drew. I have to stop day drinking. I'm so used to saying Danielle and Drew together. So Del or Danielle.
All the D's, the
The
three
three
D's.
Ds. Well,
any other questions?
Yeah.
All right. Any last words, Danielle and Del?
Well, thank you for everybody's time. We're really glad you were here. Del and I had a great time. We're very passionate about this, so we're glad that you came and joined us. And thank you, Del, for doing this with me, and really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I think the fact that anybody who's on this call invested this past hour on this topic says a lot about you.
For sure.
And so, I congratulate you, and I want to celebrate you for doing this, and thank you for committing the past hour and trying to make yourself better for your team.
Absolutely. Yep.
Well
All right,
said.
everybody. Thank you so much, Del. Thank you very much for sharing your passion for growing young leaders here today, and also with the Key Exec groups. We hear nothing but rave reviews about how you have become a mentor to them, and Danielle and I are super grateful for that. And Danielle, thank you for working with Del and getting this done. So, all right, everybody, it's been great hanging out with you. Thank you for being with us. Watch for the recording, and as always, watch for the next webinar we've got going in the next couple of months. So it was good seeing all of you. Thank you.